The weight of the lie was heavier than the platinum case of his Patek Philippe watch. As Marcus Thorne fastened the diamond tennis bracelet around his mistress's slender wrist, the cold click of the clasp echoed the sound of a door shutting on his marriage. He told his pregnant wife, Eleanor, it was a mandatory corporate leadership summit in Geneva, a necessary evil for his career. But tonight there was no summit. There was only the Phoenix Gala, the most exclusive charity event of the year, and Katrina Lowell on his arm. He was entering a world of power and influence, a world he believed his quiet, gentle wife could never understand. He had no idea that the world he was about to enter wasn't just her world. She had built it from the ground up. Marcus Thorne lived a life curated for envy. His corner office on the 54th floor of the Sterling Tower offered a panoramic view of downtown Manhattan, a daily reminder of the heights he had scaled. As a senior vice president at Apex Ventures, one of the city's most ruthless venture capital firms, he didn't just navigate the cutthroat world of high finance, he thrived in it. His suits were bespoke, his shoes were hand-cobbled in Italy, and his ambition was as sharp and unforgiving as the city's skyline. His home life, in his carefully constructed opinion, had once matched this aesthetic. The sprawling Soho loft, with its exposed brick and minimalist art, was a testament to good taste. His wife, Eleanor Vance, had been the perfect complement to his rising star. She was graceful, intelligent, with a quiet warmth that people found disarming. She came from a respectable, though not ostentatious family, and possessed an understated elegance that spoke of good breeding rather than flashy wealth. For the first 5 years of their marriage, she had been his anchor and his showcase. But lately, Marcus felt a chasm growing between the man he was in the boardroom and the man he was expected to be at home. The problem, as he saw it, was the pregnancy. Eleanor was 7 months along, and the transformation had been more than just physical. Her world had shrunk. Her conversations, once about modern art or geopolitical shifts, now revolved around obstetrician appointments, nursery color palettes, and the merits of different prenatal yoga classes. The vibrant woman he had married seemed to be fading, replaced by a vessel for his future child. He loved the idea of a son, an heir to the Thorne name. But the practical, day-to-day reality of it all, the swollen ankles, the dietary restrictions, the nesting, was profoundly unglamorous. It was domestic, it was common, and it bored him to his core. He craved the thrill of the new, the sharp edge of risk, the validation of a woman who saw him not as a future father, but as the titan of industry he was. He found that in Katrina Lowell. Katrina was everything Eleanor was not. She was a fiery, ambitious brand ambassador for a luxury lifestyle company, a woman whose professional life was a whirlwind of product launches, influencer events, and champagne receptions. She was 28, 5 years younger than Eleanor, and she looked at Marcus with an undisguised hunger that he found intoxicating. She didn't want to talk about baby-proofing the apartment. She wanted to talk about closing deals, about the new rooftop bar at the Baccarat Hotel, about the scandalous affair of a rival CEO. She was a mirror reflecting the most exciting version of himself. Their affair had started 3 months ago, a predictable cliché of clandestine meetings in boutique hotels and hushed late-night phone calls. To Marcus, it wasn't just about sex. It was a reclamation of his identity. With Katrina, he was powerful, desired, and unfettered by the impending, suffocating reality of fatherhood. The Phoenix Gala was the culmination of everything he wanted. It was the city's most prestigious annual charity event, a gathering of the financial, tech, and cultural elite. Getting an invitation was a feat in itself. Apex Ventures had a corporate table, and Marcus had pulled every string he could to secure 2 seats. This wasn't just a party. It was the ultimate networking opportunity. It was a chance to be seen with the right people, to cement his status, and to impress his firm's CEO, Richard Sterling, who was a co-chair of the event. Taking Eleanor was out of the question. He could already picture it, her in a sensible maternity gown, sipping sparkling water, wanting to leave by 10. She would be a liability, an anchor dragging him down into a sea of polite, dull conversation. He needed a partner who would sparkle, who would amplify his presence. He needed Katrina. The lie came to him easily, fully formed and polished. It's a last-minute leadership summit, he had told Eleanor a week prior, watching her carefully as she folded a tiny onesie. Geneva. Richard Sterling is making it mandatory for all senior VPs. Something about global market synergy. It's dreadfully dull, honestly, but you know how it is. Eleanor had looked up, her expression soft and trusting. Oh, Marcus, that's a shame. For the whole weekend. Afraid so. I leave Friday afternoon, back late Sunday night. I'll hate being away from you. He walked over and kissed her forehead, inhaling the familiar, gentle scent of her lavender soap. A pang of something, guilt perhaps, or a faint memory of a simpler love, pricked at him, but he pushed it down. This was a necessary sacrifice for the life he was building. Their life, he rationalized. The connections he made at this gala would benefit their family in the long run. Now, on the Friday evening of the gala, the lie was in full motion. He packed a carry-on bag with a few changes of clothes as a prop, kissed Eleanor goodbye, and told her he would call her as soon as he landed. Her hand rested on her belly as she saw him out. Be safe, Marcus. We'll miss you. I'll miss you more, he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He took a cab 2 blocks before redirecting it to the Carlisle, where Katrina was waiting. When he opened the door to her suite, she was a vision in emerald green silk, a dress that clung to her in all the right places. Her blonde hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, and her smile was dazzling. Well, hello, Mr. Thorne, she purred, wrapping her arms around his neck. Ready to own the night? He pulled her close, the sleek fabric of her dress cool against his hands. The night is just the beginning. He presented her with a small velvet box from jeweler Harry Winston. Inside was the diamond tennis bracelet he'd purchased the week before. It was an extravagant, unapologetic statement. Katrina gasped. Marcus, it's breathtaking. Only the best for you, he said, his voice smooth. He fastened it around her wrist. It was a perfect fit. He imagined the same bracelet on Eleanor's slightly swollen wrist and winced internally. It wouldn't look right. It belonged here, in this world of glamour and ambition. As they rode in the black town car toward the St. Regis Grand Astoria, where the gala was being held, Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline. The lie was behind him, the city lights blurred past the window, and the beautiful, adoring woman beside him was his ticket to the inner circle. He had successfully compartmentalized his life. On one side, Eleanor and the quiet, impending domesticity of their future. On the other, Katrina and the glittering, high-stakes world where he truly belonged. Tonight, he was stepping fully into that world, leaving the other one far behind. He was confident, untouchable, and utterly blind to the fact that the 2 worlds he had so carefully separated were on a catastrophic collision course. Eleanor Vance watched the door click shut behind Marcus, the sound echoing in the sudden quiet of the loft. She stood there for a long moment, one hand resting protectively on the taut curve of her stomach, where her son was restlessly shifting. She heard the faint ding of the elevator, and then silence. The lie Marcus had told didn't just hang in the air, It had a physical presence, a cold, heavy weight that settled in her chest. For weeks, she had been sensing a shift in him, a subtle but persistent distancing. It was in the way his phone was always angled away from her, the way late-night board meetings had become more frequent, the vague and hurried answers to her questions about his day. At first, she'd attributed it to the stress of his job and the impending life change of a baby. She had tried to be more understanding, more supportive, giving him the space she thought he needed. But a woman's intuition, especially one sharpened by the protective instincts of pregnancy, is a formidable thing. It was a collection of small, almost insignificant details that had begun to form a larger, more terrifying picture. A scent on his collar that wasn't his cologne or her perfume. An uncharacteristic defensiveness when she picked up his phone to check the time. The slow erosion of the easy intimacy they had once shared. The lie about the Geneva summit was his most audacious yet. Marcus was a meticulous planner. A mandatory international trip for his entire executive team would have been on his calendar for months, not sprung on him with a week's notice. He would have been complaining about the logistics, the jet lag, the sheer inconvenience of it all. Instead, he had been oddly serene, almost excited. The unraveling of his deceit had happened 2 days ago, born from a mundane chore. While gathering his suits for dry cleaning, a receipt had fallen from the pocket of his favorite Tom Ford blazer, the one he saved for special occasions. It wasn't from a Swiss airline or a Geneva hotel. It was from Harry Winston, dated the previous Tuesday. The purchase was for a Serena diamond bracelet, and the price had made her gasp. Her heart had hammered against her ribs. It wasn't an early anniversary gift. Theirs was in the spring. It wasn't for her birthday. A push present, perhaps? The thought was hopeful, but it didn't feel right. Marcus's recent emotional distance didn't align with such a thoughtful, extravagant gesture. Driven by a cold, sickening premonition, she had done something she hadn't done in their entire marriage. She had opened his personal laptop. It wasn't password protected. He was arrogant in his security, as he was in everything else. It didn't take long. In his archived emails, she found the confirmation. 2 tickets to the Phoenix Gala, scheduled for this very Friday night. An email chain with a Katrina Lowell confirmed their plans to meet beforehand. A quick search of the name brought up a glossy, public Instagram profile filled with photos of a stunning blonde at exclusive parties, her bio proclaiming her a luxury brand, strategist and lifestyle enthusiast. Eleanor felt the air leave her lungs as if she'd been punched. The betrayal was absolute, a clean, sharp blade through the heart of their life together. Tears had come then, hot and furious. She had cried for her marriage, for the man she thought she knew, and for the child who would be born into a broken home. She allowed herself one night to shatter. She lay in their bed, clutching the cold, impersonal receipt, and let the grief wash over her. But as the sun rose on a new day, something else rose within her. A steely, quiet resolve. Eleanor Vance was not a victim. Her quiet demeanor was often mistaken for fragility, a mistake Marcus had clearly made. What he failed to understand was that her calmness was a product of immense strength, not weakness. While Marcus was busy climbing his corporate ladder, Eleanor had been quietly building an empire of her own. For the past 2 years, she had been pouring her energy, her intellect, and a significant portion of the inheritance her forward-thinking grandmother had left her into a project she was passionate about, the Vance Foundation for Sustainable Innovation. It was a non-profit venture fund dedicated to identifying and scaling technologies that could solve real-world environmental problems: clean water, renewable energy, sustainable agriculture. She had assembled a small, brilliant team working out of a discreet office in the meatpacking district, and operated with a level of discretion that would have shocked her husband. She kept it separate from their life together, wanting it to be hers alone, a legacy to build for their child that had nothing to do with Marcus's world of predatory capitalism. And the Phoenix Gala. It wasn't just another charity event. It was her event. The gala was the official launch of the Vance Foundation. The mysterious, anonymous philanthropist who had been generating buzz in society columns for months was her. The event's name was her own private joke. A phoenix rises from the ashes. She had planned it as a triumphant surprise, a moment where she would finally reveal her work to the world and to her husband. She had imagined his shock, his pride, his awe. She had envisioned them as a true power couple, their different worlds finally merging. Now that dream was a bitter ruin. But the event itself was not. It was now something else entirely. A stage. Her first call was to Alistair Finch. Alistair was her family's lawyer, a sharp, silver-haired man in his late 60s who had been her mentor and confidant since her grandmother's passing. He sat on the board of her foundation and was one of the few people who knew the full scope of her work. "Alistair," she had said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "There's been a change of plans regarding the gala. A personal complication." She explained everything, omitting none of the painful details. He listened patiently, his silence a comforting presence on the other end of the line. When she finished, he didn't offer platitudes or sympathy. He offered strategy. "The best revenge, my dear Eleanor," he said, his voice a low rumble, "is not loud, emotional confrontation. It is quiet, irrefutable success. Let him walk into your world on his own 2 feet. Let him expose himself. The stage is set. All you have to do is take your place on it." Together they refined the plan. Security at the St. Regis was alerted to watch for Marcus Thorne and his guest, but not to stop them. The seating chart was subtly altered. Key investors and board members of Apex Ventures, including the CEO Richard Sterling, were now conveniently seated with a direct line of sight to Marcus's table. The evening's program was adjusted to heighten the drama of the founder's reveal. Eleanor spent the next 2 days in a maelstrom of focused activity. She had fittings for her custom gown, a deep sapphire blue creation by Oscar de la Renta that was both elegant and accommodating of her pregnancy. She memorized her speech, her words taking on a new, sharper meaning. Phrases about integrity, building a lasting legacy, and the importance of a solid foundation were no longer just business rhetoric. They were a personal manifesto. She was not a scorned wife seeking petty revenge. She was a queen reclaiming her castle. She was a mother protecting her child's future from the poison of his father's deceit. When she looked in the mirror on the evening of the gala, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The grief was still there, a shadow deep in her eyes, but it was overlaid with a powerful, luminous certainty. She was Eleanor Vance, founder and chairwoman of a multi-million-dollar foundation, and tonight she was going to introduce herself to her husband for the very first time. The St. Regis Grand Astoria was a bastion of old New York splendor, its marble lobby and soaring, frescoed ceilings designed to make mortals feel like gods for an evening. Tonight, it was transformed for the inaugural Phoenix Gala. Towering arrangements of white orchids and delphiniums filled the air with a delicate perfume. The sound of a string quartet echoed softly, a civilized counterpoint to the low hum of hundreds of conversations. Waitstaff moved like phantoms through the glittering crowd, balancing trays of champagne and exquisitely crafted canapes. This was the nexus of power in the city, and for Marcus Thorne, it felt like coming home. He stepped out of the town car and offered his hand to Katrina. She emerged like a starlet on a red carpet, the emerald of her dress catching the light, the Harry Winston bracelet on her wrist scattering it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. She was breathtaking, and she was his. As they walked up the grand staircase, Marcus felt a proprietary pride. He saw the appreciative glances from other men, the flicker of envy in the eyes of their wives, and it fueled his ego like premium gasoline. "This is incredible, Marcus," Katrina breathed, her eyes wide as she took in the opulence of the grand ballroom. "You weren't exaggerating." "I never do," he said smoothly, guiding her through the throng. His hand rested possessively on the small of her back. He was in his element, scanning the room, identifying the key players. He saw tech billionaires, real estate moguls, political figures, and the crème de la crème of Wall Street. This was his tribe. He quickly spotted his target, Richard Sterling, the formidable CEO of Apex Ventures, holding court near the main stage. Sterling was a man whose approval Marcus craved with an almost pathetic desperation. He was old school, a corporate predator from an era before work-life balance was part of the vernacular. "There's Sterling. Let's go say hello," Marcus said, his voice tight with anticipation. He navigated them through the crowd with practiced ease, greeting people with a firm handshake or a familiar nod. "Jonathan, good to see you." "Senator, you're looking well." He introduced Katrina as "my associate," a deliberately vague term that hinted at both professional and personal intimacy. When they reached Sterling's circle, Marcus waited for a pause before making his move. "Richard, good evening." Richard Sterling turned, his pale blue eyes assessing Marcus, and then lingering on Katrina for a beat longer than necessary. "Thorne, I wasn't aware you were attending tonight." "Wouldn't miss it," Marcus said with an easy smile, ignoring the slight. "The buzz around this new foundation has been deafening. Any idea who our mystery benefactor is?" Sterling gave a non-committal shrug. "They're playing it close to the vest. All I know is they have deep pockets and a grand vision, and they've managed to get every important person in the city into one room. That alone is a show of force." He gave Katrina a polite, dismissive nod. "Ms. Lowell. Katrina Lowell," she said, her voice a silky purr. Marcus guided her away after a few more pleasantries, a knot of irritation tightening in his stomach. Sterling's greeting had been cooler than he'd expected. He chalked it up to the older man's naturally gruff demeanor. They found their assigned table, number 12, perfectly situated, with a clear view of the stage. The centerpiece was a stunning ice sculpture of a phoenix. Marcus felt a smug satisfaction. He and Katrina made a striking couple, a portrait of success and glamour. He ordered a bottle of Dom Perignon, and as the champagne was poured, he leaned in close to Katrina. "See that man at the table to our left? That's Michael Chen. Controls half the AI startups in Silicon Valley. The woman he's with just sold her biotech firm for $2 billion. He was giving her a tour of the power landscape, but he was also reminding himself that he belonged here. Katrina listened, captivated. She was the perfect audience, impressed by the names and the money, her admiration for him growing with every sentence. This was what he was missing with Eleanor. His wife understood finance on an academic level, but she lacked the visceral hunger for the game, the appreciation for the kill. As the ballroom filled, the ambient noise grew into a symphony of clinking glasses, discreet laughter, and whispered deals. Marcus worked the room, leaving Katrina at the table like a beautiful placeholder. He moved from one influential group to another, dropping insights about market trends, sharing a well-timed joke, and forging the casual connections that were the true currency of this world. He felt powerful, alive, the master of his universe. He returned to the table just as the lights began to dim, signaling the start of the evening's program. A renowned journalist, serving as the master of ceremonies, walked onto the stage. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the inaugural Phoenix Gala," the MC began, his voice resonant and warm. "We are all here tonight to celebrate the launch of a truly revolutionary endeavor, an organization poised to change the world as we know it, the Vance Foundation for Sustainable Innovation." Marcus froze, the champagne flute halfway to his lips. Vance? It had to be a coincidence. It was a common enough name. He glanced at Katrina, but she was looking at the stage, entranced. His heart began to beat a little faster. He told himself he was being ridiculous. Eleanor's family name was Vance, yes, but they were comfortable, not titans of philanthropy. Her father was a retired history professor. Her mother tended her garden in Connecticut. They were not the type to launch a global foundation. The MC continued, "For months, the identity of the foundation's founder has been a closely guarded secret. This visionary has assembled a world-class team, secured hundreds of millions in initial funding, and has done so with a level of quiet modesty that is as rare as it is admirable." A cold dread, slick and oily, began to seep into Marcus's veins. It was an impossible thought, a fantasy so absurd he almost laughed it off. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was beginning to sprout with terrifying speed. He thought of Eleanor's quiet trips to what she called her book club, her later nights on her laptop that she'd dismissed as organizing family photos. He thought of the knowing, almost pitying, look in Alistair Finch's eyes when he'd spotted the old lawyer across the room earlier. "This is not just about charity," the MC's voice boomed through the silent ballroom. "It's about investment. Investment in our planet, in our future, and in the brilliant minds who will lead us there. And now, the moment you have all been waiting for. It is my profound honor to introduce you to the heart and soul behind this incredible initiative, the founder and chairwoman of the Vance Foundation, Mrs. Eleanor Vance Thorne." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Vance Thorne. It was not a coincidence. It was a targeted missile. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. The air grew thick and heavy, the murmuring of the crowd fading into a distant roar. He felt 100 pairs of eyes on him, though he knew they were all looking at the stage. He turned his head in a slow, robotic motion, his gaze drawn inexorably toward the spotlight. And there she was. The first sign that the evening was not going according to his meticulously crafted plan was subtle, a fleeting detail he almost missed. As Marcus and Katrina were being led to their table, he caught the eye of Alistair Finch, who was seated at a prime table near the stage with a group of stern-looking individuals in their 60s and 70s. Alistair, Eleanor's blowhard family lawyer, a man Marcus had always dismissed as a relic from a bygone era. What was he doing here? He was a small-time estate planner, not a player in this league. Alistair met his gaze, and for a split second, the old man's expression wasn't one of polite recognition. It was something else, a flicker of cold, calculated satisfaction. It was the look of a chess master who has just cornered the king. Marcus felt a prickle of unease but dismissed it. The old man was probably just surprised to see him. The feeling returned, stronger this time, when he was making his rounds. He approached Jonathan Price, a notoriously shrewd hedge fund manager he was trying to court for an investment in one of Apex's new tech funds. "Jonathan, great to see you," Marcus said, clapping him on the shoulder. Price turned, his smile thin and brittle. "Marcus, an unexpected pleasure." The emphasis on unexpected was unmistakable. I'd heard you were in Geneva this weekend. The blood in Marcus's veins turned to ice water. How could Price possibly know about his lie? A last-minute change of plans. Marcus recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. The deal I was working on closed faster than expected. You know how it is. I do, Price said, his eyes glinting with an amusement that did not reach his smile. He then turned his back, pointedly resuming his conversation with someone else. The rebuff was as sharp as a slap. Marcus retreated, his confident swagger faltering for the first time. He scanned the room with a new, paranoid lens. Were people looking at him strangely? Was that a whispered comment he overheard as he passed a table of society doyens? He felt a sudden, suffocating sense of being watched, of being the butt of a joke he didn't understand. He returned to his table, his mood soured. Katrina, oblivious, was taking a selfie, angling her phone to get the diamond bracelet in the shot. "Everything okay, handsome?" she asked, not looking up from her screen. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," he snapped, his voice harsher than he intended. "Just tired of the glad handing." The lights began to dim then, and the MC took the stage. As the man began his introductory speech, Marcus's anxiety spiked. He tried to focus on the words, but his mind was racing, replaying the odd encounters, Alistair Finch's cold smile, Jonathan Price's loaded comment. It was like watching a series of unrelated dots slowly, menacingly, beginning to connect. A gathering of the city's finest, all here to witness the birth of a new force for global good. Marcus took a large gulp of his champagne. He needed to get a grip. This was his night. He was here with a beautiful woman, surrounded by power and money. He was letting a few strange interactions get to him. An organization poised to change the world as we know it, the Vance Foundation for Sustainable Innovation. The name landed like a punch to the gut. Vance. Eleanor's name. No, it couldn't be. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe a distant cousin he'd never met? A long-lost uncle who had struck it rich? But the name was too specific, too close. The Foundation's focus on sustainability also felt eerily familiar. He remembered Eleanor's passionate dinnertime monologues about corporate irresponsibility and environmental decay. Speeches he had usually tuned out, dismissing them as the naive idealism of someone who didn't understand how the real world worked. His heart began a frantic, panicked drumming against his ribs. The ballroom, which had felt so exhilarating moments before, now felt like a trap, the walls closing in. He looked over at Richard Sterling's table. His boss was staring intently at the stage, a look of profound concentration on his face. He seemed completely absorbed, as if he knew exactly what was coming. The identity of the Foundation's founder has been a closely guarded secret. The MC's words were a drumbeat, counting down to his doom. Marcus felt the color drain from his face. His carefully constructed reality was fracturing, hairline cracks spreading through the facade. He could feel Katrina's leg pressed against his, under the table, a touch that had been electrifying an hour ago, but now felt alien and wrong. He felt a desperate, primal urge to see his wife, to be at home in their quiet loft, to turn back the clock to a time when his life was simple and his secrets were safe. But there was no escape. "It is my profound honor to introduce you to the heart and soul behind this incredible initiative, the founder and chairwoman of the Vance Foundation, Mrs. Eleanor Vance Thorne." The name, her full name, echoed through the vast hall, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system. It was a pronouncement, a judgment, a death sentence for the life he knew. A collective gasp rippled through the audience, followed by a sudden, intense wave of murmurs. Heads turned. not just toward the stage, but toward him, toward table 12, toward the man who was supposed to be in Geneva. Marcus's world collapsed into a single point of unbearable focus, the empty space at the side of the stage. He felt Katrina stiffen beside him, her hand flying to her mouth. "Vance Thorn?" she whispered, her voice filled with a dawning, horrified comprehension. "As in, you're Eleanor?" Marcus couldn't answer. He couldn't breathe. All he could do was stare as a figure emerged from the wings, stepping into the brilliant, unforgiving glare of the spotlight. It was Eleanor, his quiet, gentle, pregnant wife, and she was glowing. Eleanor walked onto the stage with a poise that silenced the entire ballroom. She wasn't the woman Marcus had left behind in their loft that afternoon. That woman had been soft, comfortable, her world defined by the impending arrival of their child. The woman in the spotlight was a force of nature. Her sapphire blue Oscar de la Renta gown flowed around her, the deep color making her stand out against the stark backdrop of the stage. The fabric was expertly tailored to drape over her 7-month baby bump, accentuating it not as a vulnerability, but as a symbol of creation and future. Her hair, usually worn in a simple, low ponytail, was styled in elegant waves that framed a face radiating an almost celestial confidence. Her only jewelry was a pair of simple diamond stud earrings and her wedding ring, which seemed to catch the light with an ironic gleam. She looked directly out at the sea of stunned faces, her gaze sweeping over them, calm and commanding. Marcus was certain her eyes found his for a fraction of a second, a moment of connection so intense it felt like a physical shock. In that fleeting glance, he saw no anger, no hysteria. He saw something far more terrifying. Absolute clarity. She stepped up to the podium, her movements fluid and unhurried. The murmuring in the crowd died down, replaced by a breathless, expectant silence. She placed her hands lightly on the sides of the lectern and smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good evening," she began, her voice clear and steady, amplified throughout the hall. It was the same voice that had asked him if he wanted coffee in the morning, but now it held an authority he had never heard before. "Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate the beginning of a new chapter." Marcus sat frozen, a statue carved from ice. He was vaguely aware of Katrina beside him, who seemed to have shrunk into herself, her face pale with shock. He could feel the weight of hundreds of stares, a palpable pressure on his skin. He saw Richard Sterling turn his head slightly, his gaze fixing on Marcus with an expression of pure, unadulterated contempt. The social fabric of the room was reweaving itself in real time, and he was being cast out. "For a long time," Eleanor continued, her eyes scanning the front rows, "I have believed that true strength isn't about the noise you make, but about the foundations you build. It's not about proclaiming your value, but about creating it, quietly, diligently, and with unwavering integrity." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart. Integrity. The word hung in the air, shimmering with unspoken meaning. Marcus felt it pierce him, a white-hot point of shame. "That is the principle upon which the Vance Foundation was built," she said, gesturing to the large screen behind her, where the Foundation's elegant logo now appeared. "My grandmother, whose name the Foundation honors, taught me that legacy isn't what you acquire, it's what you leave behind. It's about ensuring the world you pass on to your children is better, cleaner, and more just than the one you inherited." She paused, and her hand went to her stomach, a simple, maternal gesture that was simultaneously intimate and public. The entire room seemed to hold its breath with her. "This work has become more personal to me than ever in recent months," she said, her voice softening with genuine emotion. "As I prepare to bring my own child into this world, the urgency of this mission has become my singular focus. I want to build a future for my son that is rooted in honesty, in purpose, and in the fundamental truth that our actions have consequences." The subtext was so thick it was suffocating. Honesty. Consequences. This wasn't a launch speech. It was a character assassination delivered with the grace of a ballerina and the precision of a surgeon. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't shed a tear. She hadn't even mentioned his name. She didn't need to. Every person in that room understood. They knew Marcus Thorne was supposed to be in Geneva. They saw the beautiful young woman sitting beside him, dripping in diamonds. They heard his pregnant wife on stage speaking of honesty. The equation was simple, brutal, and undeniable. He watched, horrified, as Penelope Reed, the city's most influential and feared gossip columnist, scribbled furiously in her notepad, her expression one of predatory glee. His career, his reputation, his entire carefully constructed life was being dismantled, sentence by elegant sentence, in front of everyone who mattered. The Vance Foundation will invest in the innovators, the dreamers, the builders, Eleanor declared, her voice rising with passion. We will seek out and fund the technologies that others deem too risky. We will build bridges between capital and conscience. We will prove that profitability and responsibility are not mutually exclusive. A round of applause started, spontaneously, from the table where Alistair Finch was sitting. It spread like wildfire throughout the room, a thunderous, sustained ovation. It was an endorsement not just of her mission, but of her, a collective acknowledgement of her power, and a condemnation of his betrayal. Eleanor smiled and nodded, accepting the applause with a humble grace that only twisted the knife deeper. She was magnificent. She was everything he had accused her of not being: powerful, dynamic, and the absolute center of attention. He had traded a goddess for a glittering trinket, and the entire world was now his witness. As the applause died down, she delivered her final, devastating lines. "Thank you again for joining me. Together we will build a legacy we can be proud of, a foundation that is strong, true, and unshakable." She stepped back from the podium, and the lights came up. The illusion was over. The night of reckoning had begun. Marcus Thorne was trapped in the glare, exposed and utterly, irrevocably ruined. The moment the applause for Eleanor subsided, a new sound filled the ballroom, the frantic, excited buzz of gossip. The air, which had been electric with inspiration, was now charged with the lurid energy of scandal. It was a feeding frenzy, and Marcus Thorne was the bait. He remained motionless at his table, the world a blurry, indistinct chaos around him. People were standing up, turning to their neighbors, their faces a mixture of shock, pity, and delicious, Schadenfreude-fueled glee. He could feel their eyes on him like physical blows. He was no longer Marcus Thorne, the Titan in training. He was a story, a headline, a cautionary tale. Katrina was the first to move. The color had completely drained from her face, leaving a pasty, terrified mask. The Harry Winston bracelet, which had seemed like a symbol of triumph an hour ago, now looked like a shackle. I have to go," she stammered, grabbing her clutch from the table. She didn't look at him. She couldn't. Her eyes were darting around the room, seeing her own social standing evaporating in the fallout of his implosion. She had hitched her wagon to a falling star, and her only instinct was to uncouple it as fast as possible. "Katrina, wait," Marcus managed to say, his voice a dry croak. "Don't!" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. Don't you dare speak to me. You have ruined me." She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, and practically fled, weaving through the tables without a backward glance. He watched her go, a small, pathetic part of him wanting her to stay, to offer some solidarity in this public execution. But he knew it was a fool's hope. Theirs was a union of convenience and ambition, not loyalty. It had no foundation. His gaze was then drawn, as if by a magnetic force, to Richard Sterling's table. His CEO rose from his chair, a man who commanded attention without ever raising his voice. He wasn't walking toward the stage to congratulate Eleanor. He was walking directly toward Marcus. The entire ballroom seemed to go quiet again, watching this new act in the drama unfold. Sterling stopped before Marcus's table, his face an inscrutable granite slab. He looked down at Marcus, who remained seated, pinned by the weight of the older man's disapproval. "Thorn," Sterling said, his voice quiet, but carrying the chilling finality of a judge's gavel. "My office, Monday morning, 9 o'clock. Clear out your desk beforehand." He didn't wait for a response. He simply turned and walked away, a silent, devastating dismissal. And with those few words, Marcus's career at Apex Ventures, the career for which he had sacrificed his integrity, his marriage, and his soul, was over. Now he was truly alone. A pariah at a party he had desperately wanted to attend. He finally found the strength to stand, his legs feeling unsteady beneath him. He had to get to Eleanor. He had to say something, do something, try to salvage some piece of the wreckage. He moved through the room like a ghost. People who had been eager to shake his hand an hour ago now pointedly turned their backs, suddenly engrossed in conversation or the pattern on the carpet. The air around him was a vacuum of social ostracism. He found her backstage, in a small private room, accepting congratulations from Alistair Finch and a few of her board members. When she saw him enter, she calmly dismissed them. "If you'll excuse us for a moment," she said, her voice betraying no emotion. The others filed out, casting wary glances at Marcus as they passed. The door clicked shut, leaving the two of them alone. The silence was deafening. She stood by a window overlooking the city, her silhouette framed by the glittering skyline she had just conquered. She didn't look at him. "Eleanor," he began, his voice cracking. I don't know what to say." "That's a first," she said, her tone flat and cold. "You always have a story, Marcus. A summit in Geneva, a mandatory meeting. You're never at a loss for words. Listen, I can explain." "No," she said, finally turning to face him. Her eyes were hard, the soft warmth he took for granted, completely gone. "You can't. There is no explanation for this level of disrespect, not just to me, but to our child. I made a mistake, a terrible, stupid mistake," he pleaded, taking a step toward her. "I was wrong. I was scared about the baby, about everything changing. Scared." She let out a short, sharp laugh, devoid of all humor. "You weren't scared, Marcus. You were bored. You thought I was boring. You looked at me, carrying your son, and all you saw was the end of your exciting life. So you went out and bought yourself a new one, a shinier one. How is that working out for you?" Her words were scalpels, dissecting him with brutal accuracy. "I love you, Eleanor," he said, the words feeling hollow and false, even to his own ears. "We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can do nothing," she interrupted, her voice dropping to a near whisper, which was somehow more terrifying than if she had screamed. "You seem to be under the impression that this was an act of jealous revenge, that I did all of this to hurt you. You've always had a magnificent ego." She took a step closer, and for the first time, He saw the deep, profound pain behind the steely resolve. This wasn't for you, Marcus. This was for me. This was about me taking back my name, my power, and the future you tried to poison with your lies. The gala was always happening. My foundation was always my priority. The only thing your betrayal changed was the guest list. He stared at her, finally understanding the depth of his miscalculation. He hadn't just cheated on his wife. He had fundamentally misunderstood who she was. He had been playing checkers while she was playing three-dimensional chess. "My lawyer will be in touch with yours on Monday," she said, turning back toward the window, a clear dismissal. "Alistair has already drawn up the divorce papers. I'll be generous for the baby's sake. But make no mistake, we are over." "Eleanor, please," he begged, his voice breaking. "Don't do this." She didn't turn around. "It's already done. You should probably go, Marcus. You're creating a scene." He stood there for another moment, a broken man in a bespoke suit, looking at the back of the woman he had so casually thrown away. He had walked into this ballroom thinking he was on top of the world. He was leaving it with nothing. He turned and walked out of the room, out of the gala, and out of her life, the sound of her quiet success echoing behind him. 6 months later, the city was settling into the crisp embrace of early spring. The cherry blossoms were beginning to bloom in Central Park, their delicate pink and white petals a testament to renewal and new beginnings. For Eleanor Vance, the symbolism was not lost. Her life had been reborn from the ashes of her marriage. The Phoenix Gala had been a resounding success, not just as a public relations coup, but as the launch pad for a genuinely impactful organization. The Vance Foundation for Sustainable Innovation was the talk of both the financial and philanthropic worlds. Eleanor had proven to be a shrewd and visionary leader, attracting top-tier talent and securing partnerships with some of the most innovative green tech companies on the planet. She was featured on the cover of Forbes, not as a spurned wife, but as a titan of tomorrow. Her greatest achievement, however, was currently sleeping soundly in a bassinet by her desk. Her son, Arthur Vance, was 2 months old, a beautiful, healthy baby, with his mother's calm eyes and a dusting of soft brown hair. He was the center of her universe, the quiet, gurgling purpose behind every decision she made. She had dropped the thorn from her name the day the divorce was finalized, severing the last formal tie to her past. She was Eleanor Vance now, a name that was entirely her own, and a name she would one day proudly pass to her son. Her Soho loft, once a shared space filled with ghosts and lies, had been redecorated. The cold, minimalist aesthetic Marcus had favored was gone, replaced with warm colors, comfortable furniture, and shelves filled with books and photographs of her family. It was a home now, not just a showcase. Marcus, by contrast, had all but disappeared. The fallout from the gala had been swift and brutal. Fired from Apex Ventures, he had been effectively blacklisted on Wall Street. The story was too public, the humiliation too complete. No reputable firm would touch him. Penelope Reed's column had detailed every sordid aspect of the affair, painting him as a fool and a cad. Katrina Lowell had faded into obscurity, her brand ambassador career torpedoed by the scandal. He had sold his sports car and moved out of the city, retreating to a small, rented condo in a faceless suburb. He had tried in the beginning to fight. His lawyers had postured and threatened, but Alistair Finch had systematically dismantled their every argument. The prenuptial agreement was ironclad, and Eleanor's settlement offer was, as she had promised, more than generous. It was enough for him to live comfortably, but not enough to ever reclaim the life of power and luxury he had coveted. One Tuesday afternoon, as Eleanor was reviewing a proposal for a new desalination technology, Her assistant buzzed her. "Miss Vance, there's a Marcus Thorne here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." Eleanor felt a flicker of something, not anger, not sadness, but a distant, weary pity. "Send him in, Sarah." He walked into her office, and the change was startling. The bespoke suit was gone, replaced by a rumpled blazer and slacks that didn't quite fit. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a hesitant, shuffling gait. He looked tired and diminished. "Eleanor," he said, his voice quiet. "Marcus, what can I do for you?" she asked, her tone polite but professional. She didn't stand up. I wanted to see him," he said, his eyes flicking to the bassinet. Eleanor considered it for a moment, then nodded. "Of course." She picked Arthur up gently. The baby stirred but remained asleep, his little chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. She held him out for Marcus to see, but did not offer for him to hold him. Marcus stared at his son, his face a complex mixture of regret, wonder, and profound loss. This tiny, perfect human was a part of him, yet he was a complete stranger. He had been so consumed by the fear of what a child would take from him that he had never stopped to consider what one could give. "He's perfect," Marcus whispered, a tear tracing a path down his cheek. "Yes, he is," Eleanor said simply. They stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the soft breathing of the baby. "I'm sorry, Eleanor," Marcus finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "For everything. I was an idiot. I threw away the only real thing in my life for nothing. For smoke." Eleanor looked at him, and for the first time she felt the last vestiges of her anger dissipate, leaving only a calm, quiet emptiness where her love for him used to be. "I know you are, Marcus," she said, and it was the truth. She could see the sincerity of his remorse, but it didn't change anything. A vase that has been shattered can be glued back together, but the cracks will always show. Some things, once broken, can never be truly fixed. "I've accepted your apology," she continued, "for my own peace of mind, and for Arthur's. You are his father, and you will have a place in his life. We will arrange a visitation schedule. But that is all we will have." He nodded, understanding. The hope for reconciliation he may have been foolishly clinging to was gone. He had come here seeking absolution, perhaps even a second chance. He was leaving with a visitation schedule. It was more than he deserved, and far less than he had lost. After he left, Eleanor stood by the window of her office, rocking her son gently in her arms. She looked out over the city, the same view Marcus once had, but she saw it differently. He had seen it as a ladder to be climbed, a prize to be won. She saw it as a world to be improved, a future to be built. She had lost a husband, but she had found herself. She had endured betrayal, but she had discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. Her foundation wasn't just the one she had built for the world, it was the one she had rebuilt for herself and her son. It was strong, true, and utterly unshakable. And from this new dawn, the future looked bright. The story of Eleanor Vance is a powerful reminder that the quietest people often have the most to say, and that true power isn't about the life you project, but the one you build with integrity. Marcus Thorne thought he was trading up, but he traded a diamond for dust, blinded by his own reflection. He learned the hard way that a person's true worth is revealed not when they are in the spotlight, but when they are the ones who control the switch. What did you think of Eleanor's incredible moment of triumph? Was her revenge perfectly orchestrated, or would you have done something different? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and your perspective makes our community richer. If you were captivated by this story of betrayal and empowerment, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who loves a good story, and most importantly, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next upload. Thanks for listening. A man's arrogance is a dangerous thing. For Arthur Vance, it was a blinding narcotic. He stood on the balcony of the 20,000 a night imperial suite at Villa Kestrel, his arm wrapped around a woman who was not his wife. He'd brought his mistress to the most exclusive resort on Lake Como to celebrate the end of his marriage, assuming his quiet, timid wife was at home, weeping. He was about to humiliate her, to flaunt his new life in her face. But Arthur made one catastrophic mistake. He assumed he was the predator when he was merely the fool walking into the trap. The Riva boat cut through the azure water of Lake Como, its mahogany deck gleaming like polished obsidian. Arthur Vance checked his watch, a Patek Philippe Nautilus, rose gold. It was a $300,000 statement that screamed, "I have arrived." Beside him, Sienna, squeezed into a canary yellow dress, angled her phone to capture her profile against the dramatic backdrop of the Alps. "Is it exclusive, baby?" she asked, her voice a breathy purr. "I don't want to see any families." "The Villa Kestrel, darling," Arthur replied, his voice booming with the self-satisfaction of a man who had just conquered the world. "It's not a hotel, it's a private estate. They only have 12 suites. The waiting list is 3 years long, unless you're me." He had, of course, leveraged a recent, spectacular quarter at his hedge fund, Vance Capital, to bully the concierge at his private bank into securing the reservation. This trip was a celebration, a victory lap. 2 days ago, he had instructed his lawyers to serve divorce papers to his wife, Amelia. Amelia. The name tasted like ash in his mouth. Dull, beige, predictable Amelia. She was the woman he'd married 15 years ago, a strategic merger of his new money ambition with her quiet, respectable family name. She was the ballast he'd needed then, but now she was just dead weight. She spent her days managing her family office, a quaint little inheritance he never bothered to look into, and engaging in quiet philanthropy. She was a ghost in his minimalist mansion, a woman who wore cashmere in neutral tones and never, ever raised her voice. Sienna was the opposite. She was loud, demanding, and spectacularly beautiful. She was a living, breathing trophy, a testament to his success. The boat slowed, approaching a stone dock shrouded in ancient wisteria. A man in an impeccably tailored linen suit was waiting. This was Alessandro Bianchi, the general manager. "Mr. Vance, welcome to Villa Kestrel," Bianchi said, his smile polite but lacking warmth. "We have the imperial suite," Arthur announced, not as a question, but as a declaration. "Of course, sir, if you would follow me." The grounds were magnificent, a tiered paradise of cypress trees and blooming azaleas. Arthur felt a surge of power. This was his world now. As they were led into the main villa, a converted 17th century palace, Arthur paused. "My bags," he snapped, gesturing back toward the dock. "They are already in your suite, sir," Bianchi replied smoothly. The imperial suite was larger than his first apartment. It was a sprawling expanse of marble, frescoes, and modern Italian furniture, with a private terrace that seemed to float over the lake. "This will do," Sienna said, flopping onto a chaise lounge and immediately starting a video for her followers. Arthur, meanwhile, cornered Bianchi. "I'll need a dinner reservation for tonight. 8 o'clock. The best table at your restaurant, Alba d'Oro. And I'll require a specific wine. A double magnum of the 97 Screaming Eagle." Bianchi's eyebrow twitched, the barest flicker of surprise. "Sir, Our restaurant focuses on indigenous Italian varietals. I am almost certain we do not have that particular Napa Cabernet." "Then find it," Arthur said, dismissing him with a wave. "Have it flown in from Milan. I don't care about the cost. I am celebrating a significant personal victory." "As you wish, sir," Bianchi said, his voice clipped. "Will Signora Vance be joining you for this trip?" Arthur laughed, a short, barking sound. "You mean my wife? God, no. She's not exactly the Villa Kestrel type. She's at home, probably, cataloguing stamps or whatever it is she does. We're getting a divorce. This," he said, gesturing to Sienna, "is the future." Bianchi's expression remained unreadable. He simply nodded. "I see. Enjoy your stay, Mr. Vance." As the manager left, Arthur uncorked the complimentary bottle of champagne. He felt invincible. He had his youth, or a semblance of it, a stunning mistress, and a rapidly expanding fortune. He had finally cut the cord from his boring, passionless marriage. He raised his glass to Sienna. "To new beginnings," he toasted. "To us," she giggled, clinking her glass against his. From the lake below, the distant thrum of another boat engine approached, but Arthur, lost in his own reflection in the window, paid it no mind. The first 24 hours were a blur of decadent indulgence, precisely as Arthur had planned. He and Sienna were deliberately, extravagantly loud. They monopolized the main infinity pool, taking endless photos and ordering magnums of rosé before noon. Arthur took work calls by the pool, shouting aggressive instructions to his traders in New York about shorting a new tech stock. "We're going to bleed them dry, Robert," he yelled into his phone, enjoying the winces from an elderly couple reading nearby. Sienna, meanwhile, treated the staff with a casual disdain that mirrored Arthur's. She sent back a plate of prosciutto e melone because the melon was too orange. She complained that the thread count on the pool towels was acceptable, but not amazing. Arthur loved it. He loved her entitlement. It reflected his own. That evening, they prepared for their dinner at Ristorante Alba d'Oro. Arthur was fastening his Patek when his lawyer, Stephen, called from New York. "Arthur, just confirming. The papers were served to Amelia's residence this morning. The process server noted she accepted them personally." "And? Did she cry? Fall apart?" Arthur asked, straightening his silk tie. "The server just said she was polite." She signed for them and closed the door. Arthur scoffed. "Polite, of course. She's probably already called her mother and retreated to the family home in Connecticut." "Pathetic. Good. The quicker she accepts this, the quicker I can finalize the settlement. Give her the house. I don't care. I'll buy 3 more. "About the settlement, Arthur." Stephen paused. "Her lawyers haven't responded yet. But the prenup is ironclad. She gets the house and the stipulated alimony. Your main assets, the fund, are completely protected." "Exactly," Arthur said. "She was a nice distraction, but she can't compete in the big leagues. Now, if you'll excuse me, Stephen, I have a $10,000 bottle of wine waiting for me." He hung up and turned to Sienna, who was applying a final layer of lip gloss. "It's done," he said. "The anchor is officially cut." They descended the grand staircase to the restaurant. The maitre d' led them to the best table, set on a small private balcony overlooking the twinkling lights of Bellagio across the lake. It was obscenely romantic. "See?" Arthur whispered to Sienna. "I own this place." The dinner began well. The food was undeniably brilliant, but Arthur was waiting for his wine. Finally, Mr. Bianchi approached their table, his hands empty. "Mr. Vance, my sincere apologies." "You found it, I trust?" Arthur said, annoyed at the interruption. "Sir, as I explained, we do not carry that bottle. I did, as requested, contact our suppliers in Milan and even Zurich. It is not possible to procure a double magnum of that vintage on such short notice. Arthur felt a flush of anger. Not possible? Do you understand who I am? Not possible isn't an acceptable answer. We do, however, Bianchi continued, his voice dangerously calm, have one of the finest cellars in Lombardy. I would be happy to recommend a Barolo or a Super Tuscan that would far exceed— I don't want a Barolo, Arthur snapped, his voice rising. Several diners turned to look. I wanted what I asked for. This is supposed to be a 5-star establishment, Sienna chimed in. He told you like hours ago. Are you incompetent? Bianchi's eyes hardened, but his voice remained level. I apologize that we could not meet your expectations, Signorina. I will leave you to your meal. He turned and walked away. The nerve, Arthur hissed. I'll have his job for this. I'll buy this entire hotel and fire him myself. You should, baby, Sienna agreed, already forgetting the wine and taking a selfie. But the interaction left a bitter taste in Arthur's mouth. It was the first time since his arrival that his power had been questioned. It was a tiny crack in the facade of his perfect weekend, and it infuriated him. He felt a prickle of unease, a sense that the deference he'd been shown earlier was not awe, but something else. A strained tolerance. He pushed the feeling down, ordering the most expensive other wine on the list and drinking it too quickly. He would not let some jumped-up hotel manager ruin his triumph. The next day, Arthur woke with a dull headache from the wine. He was determined to erase the previous night's slight. He would spend the day on the lake, projecting an image of such effortless wealth that the entire staff would be forced to grovel. He and Sienna emerged onto the sun-drenched breakfast terrace, dressed in matching white linen. Arthur was loudly detailing his plan to rent the hotel's vintage Riva speedboat for the day when he suddenly froze. His coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. Across the terrace, seated at a quiet corner table shaded by a massive olive tree, was Amelia. It was impossible. He blinked, certain the high-proof wine and the bright sun were creating a mirage. But it was her. She was not crying. She was not dressed in black. She was wearing a simple, elegant, cream-colored silk shell top and white trousers. Loro Piana, he registered absently. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple chignon. She was reading a book and sipping an espresso. She looked peaceful. Sienna, oblivious, was still talking. And I want them to pack a huge basket, with caviar, and those little sandwiches and— Shut up, Arthur hissed. What? Sienna looked offended. Arthur couldn't take his eyes off his wife. His wife, here in the same hotel. How dare she? His mind raced, cycling through emotions. First, shock, then a burning, white-hot rage. She was stalking him. She had received the divorce papers and, in a pathetic, desperate move, had followed him here to— What? Confront him? Make a scene? Beg him to come back? A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. The initial shock subsided, replaced by a profound sense of satisfaction. This was even better than he'd imagined. He thought she would crumble in private, in their empty mansion. But she had delivered herself to him. She had brought her humiliation to the most beautiful place on earth, right to his doorstep. "Baby, what is it?" Sienna asked, finally noticing his fixed stare. She followed his gaze. Oh my God, is that her? The soon-to-be ex-Mrs. Vance? Arthur sneered, his good mood restored. What is she doing here? Sienna whispered, horrified. This is our trip. It's so tacky. She looks so plain. She's desperate, darling. This is the last pathetic act of a dying animal, Arthur said, savoring the moment. She thinks she can guilt me. She thinks she can ruin our celebration. He watched Amelia for a long moment. The most unsettling part was her calm. She didn't look like a woman on the verge of a breakdown. She looked serene. She turned a page in her book. She ordered a second espresso from a waiter, who addressed her with a familiarity that annoyed Arthur. "Well, I'm not having it," Sienna declared, standing up. "I'm going to go over there and tell her to leave." "No, no." Arthur pulled her back down, his mind formulating a much more delicious plan. "Don't interrupt her. Let her have her breakfast. We'll be on the boat all day. The real fun, the real confrontation, should be public. Let's wait until tonight, at the bar, right before dinner. We'll let everyone see her for what she is." "What is she?" Sienna asked, confused. "A ghost," Arthur said, his eyes glinting. "And it's time to exorcise her." But as he tried to enjoy his day, the image of her calm, composed face plagued him. He'd expected tears, hysterics, shouted accusations. He'd expected a fight. Her quiet presence was a dissonant note in his perfectly composed symphony of triumph. He found himself checking the terrace from the boat, wondering if she was still there. He became agitated, snapping at Sienna when she asked him to take a photo for the 10th time. "Just enjoy the view, will you?" he barked. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Her being there wasn't just desperate. It was illogical. Amelia hated attention. She hated confrontation. Why would she fly across the world to a place she knew he would be, only to sit quietly and read a book? He dismissed it as the bizarre, irrational behavior of a woman scorned. He was in control. He was the one with the power. And that evening, he was going to prove it. The air at sunset was thick with the scent of jasmine. The hotel's main terrace bar was filling up with the other guests, a German industrialist, a French actress, a Silicon Valley billionaire. It was a crowd of quiet, immense power. This was the stage Arthur had chosen. He and Sienna took a central sofa, ordering the most expensive champagne. He saw Amelia enter the terrace. She was alone. She had changed into a simple, navy blue silk dress. No jewelry, save for her plain gold wedding band, which she twisted thoughtfully, and a pair of simple pearl earrings. She took a small table by the balustrade, overlooking the lake. She ordered a glass of water with lemon. "She's not even drinking," Sienna whispered, disgusted. "It's like she's trying to be boring." "It's show time," Arthur said, standing up. He smoothed his custom-made blazer, took Sienna's hand, and began to walk toward his wife. He felt the eyes of the other guests follow him. They recognized him from the pool. They recognized her from breakfast. This was going to be delicious. He stopped directly in front of her table. She looked up, her expression mild, as if noticing a waiter, not the husband who had just filed for divorce. "Amelia," Arthur began, his voice dripping with false pity. "What a fascinating surprise." "Hello, Arthur," she said, her voice even. "Sienna." Sienna, feeling her cue, stepped forward. "I just don't understand what you're doing here, Amelia. It's really pathetic. Can't you take a hint? He's with me. This is our vacation." Arthur held up a hand, silencing Sienna with a gesture. Now, darling. Let's be gentle. She's clearly going through a difficult time." He looked back at Amelia, his smile becoming a sneer. "Really, Amelia? This is a new low, even for you. Following me here? Did you really think you could fly to Lake Como and I'd just... What? Forget everything and take you back?" Amelia took a slow sip of her water. "I'm not here for you, Arthur." "Oh, please." Arthur laughed, a harsh sound that made the German industrialist look over with annoyance. "Who else would you be here for? Did you come to scrub the floors? I didn't realize your little family fund was doing so poorly that you needed a part-time job." "You need to leave," Sienna insisted. "You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing him. She's right, Arthur said, leaning in, his voice dropping to a confidential, cruel whisper. It's over. I've moved on. I've upgraded. You need to accept it. Go home. Go back to your garden, or your charities, or whatever it is you do. You don't belong here. This world, it's not for you. It's for people who take what they want. You're just the person who gets left behind. He stood back, arms crossed, waiting for the tears, waiting for the breakdown. Amelia simply looked at him. She held his gaze for a full 10 seconds, her eyes clear and steady. There was no pain in them. There was no anger. He couldn't place it. It looked almost like pity. Are you finished? She asked. The question caught him off guard. Am I? What? Your speech. It was very theatrical. Are you finished? Before Arthur could reply, Mr. Bianchi, the general manager, appeared at his elbow. His face was a mask of cold professionalism. Mr. Vance, Bianchi said, his voice quiet but carrying the unmistakable weight of authority. Ah, Bianchi, Arthur said, turning triumphant. Perfect timing. It seems we have a trespasser. This woman is not a guest. She is my estranged wife, and she is harassing me. Please have her removed from the property. Quietly, if possible. I'm feeling generous. Sienna smirked, pulling out her phone, no doubt to film the walk of shame. Bianchi did not look at Amelia. His eyes were locked on Arthur. Mr. Vance, I am the one who must ask you to be quiet. You are causing a disturbance to our other guests. Arthur's smile vanished. Excuse me. I am the guest. She is the trespasser. Remove her. Now. I'm afraid you are mistaken, sir, Bianchi said. Signora Vance is our guest. You are the one who is no longer welcome. The terrace went silent. The only sound was the gentle la-la-la-lap of the lake water against the stone walls below. Arthur felt a cold dread, a sudden sickening drop in his stomach, like a faulty elevator. What did you just say? He said you're not welcome, Arthur, Amelia said, finally setting her water glass down. She stood up. She was shorter than him, but suddenly she seemed to command the entire terrace. This is ridiculous, Arthur sputtered, looking around for support. The other guests were pointedly looking away, pretending to be fascinated by their olives. I have the Imperial Suite. I'm paying $20,000 a night. You can't. Bianchi, are you insane? Do you know who I am? I'm afraid I do, Mr. Vance, Bianchi said, and I am acting on direct orders from my employer. Then get your employer, Arthur roared. He's standing right in front of him, Amelia said. The world seemed to tilt. Arthur stared at her. He looked at Bianchi. He looked back at her. The dots connected, but the picture they made was impossible. You're not? What? Amelia asked. A guest? You're right, I'm not. I haven't been a guest here for 6 weeks. She turned to the manager. Alessandro, how are the new kitchen renovations at Albadoro coming along? I saw the invoices for the new Molteni stoves. They are performing beautifully, Signora Vance, Bianchi replied, his voice now filled with the warmth that had been absent before. The chefs are ecstatic. Your choice was, as always, perfect. Signora Vance? Arthur whispered. The name echoed in his ears. Bianchi had used it before, at the dock, but he'd assumed. I bought it, Arthur, Amelia said, her voice flat as if discussing the weather. The Villa Kestrel, and the 2 smaller properties in Tuscany, and the vineyard in Piedmont. My quaint little family office, as you called it, decided to expand its hospitality portfolio. This, she gestured to the stunning villa around them, is one of its smaller, more recent acquisitions. Arthur's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. You're lying, he finally managed to say. This is a joke, a sick, twisted joke. Am I? Amelia reached into her Bottega Veneta clutch and pulled out a single key card. It was a heavy, black metal card. This is the master override. It opens every door in this hotel, including, I believe, the Imperial Suite. She turned to Bianchi. Alessandro, Mr. Vance, and his guest will be checking out immediately. Wait! Sienna shrieked, finally finding her voice. Her face was pale with shock. You can't do this. We have a reservation. We've paid. On the contrary, Amelia said, turning her cool gaze on Sienna. Your reservation, which was tied to Mr. Vance's corporate account, was cancelled this morning. As for payment, she looked at Arthur. The credit card you have on file, the Amex Centurion card from the corporate account, it was declined about, 2 hours ago. A rather precipitous drop in your available credit, it seems. This was the part Arthur couldn't understand. Declined? That's impossible. My fund is worth 9 figures. I have a limitless credit line. Had, Arthur, Amelia corrected him. You had a limitless credit line. You see, that's the other thing I've been busy with. What? What other thing? Arthur asked, but he was afraid of the answer. The air had become thin. He couldn't seem to draw a full breath. While you were celebrating, I was with my legal team, Amelia explained, her tone conversational. You were always so careless with the paperwork, Arthur. You found it so boring. You just signed whatever Stephen put in front of you. The prenup, Arthur said, grasping at straws. It's ironclad. My fund is protected. Your fund, yes. Vance Capital is all yours, Amelia agreed. The problem, Arthur, is that Vance Capital is now worth nothing. Arthur's blood turned to ice. What are you talking about? You're a hedge fund manager, Arthur. You understand leverage. You understand collateral. She began to walk slowly toward him, and for the first time, he found himself taking a step back. The seed money you used to start your fund, 15 years ago, she continued. The angel investment you thought you'd charmed out of that old banker. That wasn't him. That was my father. It came from my family trust. But it wasn't a gift, Arthur. It was a loan collateralized not just by the fund's assets, but by every asset tied to the trust. That's not true. It is. And when you married me, you signed a waiver giving me, as the executor of my father's estate, full proxy control over that collateral in the event of gross personal misconduct. I believe adultery, particularly with an employee. Yes, I know Sienna was your marketing assistant. Counts. The papers I signed this morning weren't divorce papers, Arthur. They were default notices. Arthur's phone, which had been silent all day, suddenly buzzed. He pulled it out with a trembling hand. A text from his COO, Robert. Margin call. All lines. J.P. Morgan is pulling our credit. Arthur, what did you do? Another buzz. His private bank. Urgent. Immediate repayment demanded on all personal loans. Another. Vance Capital assets. Frozen pending investigation. While you were at the pool, Amelia said, I called the note. All of it. The stocks you were shorting? My fund took the long position, backed by a consortium I put together. Your little bleed them dry plan? You were betting against me, and you lost. She gestured to his wrist. That Patek, the house, the jet you flew here on, they weren't yours, Arthur. They were on loan, and the loan has been recalled. Arthur stumbled backward, hitting a stone pillar. He wasn't just divorced. He wasn't just embarrassed. He was ruined. He was nothing. The entire edifice of his life, his wealth, his power, had been a house of cards balanced on his wife's boring family trust. He looked at Sienna. Her face was a mask of horror and calculation. She was looking at Arthur, but not with sympathy. She was looking at him as if he were a contagious disease. "Arthur," she whispered, her voice tight with panic. Is it true?" Arthur couldn't speak. He just stared at his phone, watching his life evaporate in a series of text messages. "Oh my God," Sienna said, backing away from him. "Oh my, I need to use the restroom." She turned and fled, not toward the restrooms, but back toward the lobby. She didn't look back once. Arthur was left alone, surrounded by the quiet hum of the wealthy guests who were now openly staring. He looked at Amelia. The ghost. The beige, boring, predictable woman who had just dismantled his entire world before her water glass got warm. "Why?" he whispered, the only word he could find. "You asked me if I came here to scrub the floors," Amelia said, her voice devoid of triumph. It was just final. "I came here to sign the quarterly reports. You just happened to be here, too." She signaled to Bianchi. Two large, polite, and unyieldingly firm security men materialized from the shadows. "Alessandro," Amelia said, turning her back on Arthur. "Please show Mr. Vance the service exit. His things are being brought down." She walked away, not toward the restaurant, but toward a private study. A man Arthur hadn't noticed before, a distinguished man in a dark suit, her lawyer, David, he now realized, stood up as she approached, holding a folio of documents for her to sign. "Wait!" Arthur cried out. "Amelia! Wait! We can talk about this!" But she didn't turn around. She just disappeared inside, the door closing with a quiet, expensive click. The humiliation was a physical thing, a cold, heavy blanket that smothered the air from his lungs. The two security men, both named Giorgio, didn't lay a hand on him, but their presence was a cage. They moved with the calm, inexorable certainty of men who dealt with distasteful situations for a living, their professionalism a far deeper insult than any overt aggression could have been. Arthur, who had commanded boardrooms with a single glance, was now being herded like a stray animal. They guided him not through the grand, marble-floored lobby where he had made his triumphant entrance, but down a series of sterile service corridors. The walls were stark white, scuffed with black marks from delivery carts. The air, once scented with jasmine and expensive perfume, now smelled faintly of bleach and cooking oil. It was the resort's hidden anatomy, the guts he was never meant to see. Each step away from the opulent guest areas was a step down a ladder he hadn't known he was climbing, a descent into a world he thought he had long since escaped. The office they led him into was small and windowless, furnished with a single metal desk and a rolling chair with a tear in the vinyl. On the wall was a corkboard pinned with staff schedules and safety notices. This was the nadir. This was where his imperial reign ended. His luggage, the entire set of custom monogrammed Louis Vuitton hard cases that a personal shopper had assured him projected effortless global power, was piled unceremoniously by the door. It wasn't stacked with care. It was dumped, a monument to his fallen status. A junior staff member, a young man named Luca with nervous eyes and a carefully neutral expression, was waiting for him. He studiously avoided looking directly at Arthur, focusing instead on a tablet he held with both hands. "Mr. Vance," Luca began, his voice barely above a murmur. Arthur's instinct, the snarling, cornered reflex of a deposed king, was to lash out. "Don't you Mr. Vance me! Get Bianchi down here! Get me the owner! This is an outrage!" Luca flinched but held his ground. The Giorgios, standing by the door, shifted their weight ever so slightly, a silent reminder of the new reality. Luca's refusal to engage, his adherence to protocol, was another wall Arthur couldn't breach. He was no longer a guest to be placated. He was a problem to be processed. "I need you to sign here, sir," Luca said, extending the tablet. "It's a receipt for your personal effects, acknowledging that you have taken possession of them from the property." Arthur stared at the screen. The list of his own belongings felt like an indictment. 1-1 Patek Philippe watch, rose gold. 1-1 pair of Loro Piana driving loafers. 3-3 bespoke Brioni suits. It was an inventory of his ruin. He snatched the stylus, his hand shaking with such violent tremors that his signature was a jagged, illegible scar across the screen. He shoved the tablet back at the boy. Luca took it, his eyes flicking down for a moment. He seemed to steel himself for the next part. "Sir, your associate, Miss Sienna. She left a message for you." A flicker of something pathetic and desperate ignited in Arthur's chest. Hope. Maybe she'd had a change of heart. Maybe she was waiting for him, had arranged a car. Maybe this was all a terrible misunderstanding. "What is it? Did she get a taxi? Where is she?" Luca swallowed, his gaze fixed on a point on the wall just over Arthur's shoulder. "She said," and these were her words, sir, "do not contact me. Ever." The words struck Arthur with the force of a physical blow. Ever. Not "I'm sorry," not "I'll call you," but a final, brutal severing. He saw her now with horrifying clarity, not as a partner, not even as a mistress, but as a parasite that had just detached itself from a dying host. He had seen her as a prize he had won. She had seen him as a position she had temporarily occupied. As if to twist the knife, Luca slid a small, sealed envelope across the desk. The paper was the same thick, creamy stock used for the restaurant menus. Arthur tore it open with fumbling fingers. Inside was not a note of apology or explanation. It was a bill. It was an itemized list of every incidental he and Sienna had consumed since their arrival. It was all there in crisp, unforgiving black ink. The 4 magnums of Taitinger Rosé by the pool, the emergency Dior sunglasses Sienna had insisted on from the hotel boutique, the couple's massage he hadn't even wanted, the ridiculously expensive plate of melon she had sent back. Every single charge was a small monument to his own foolishness. He scanned down to the bottom line, a number that would have been trivial to him just that morning. $22,480. Below it, stamped in a vicious, accusatory red, were 2 words: "Payment declined." "My cards. There must be a mistake," he stammered, the lie tasting like acid in his mouth. He knew there was no mistake. He could feel the digital guillotine that Amelia had dropped, severing him from the global financial network. "We are aware of the situation, sir," Luca said, his voice soft with what might have been pity. "Signora Vance's instructions were to put it on your tab. This copy is for your records." For your records. A final mocking piece of paperwork for the man who was now a non-entity. He crumpled the bill in his fist, the thick paper resisting, a final echo of the quality he could no longer afford. One of the Giorgios opened the service door, revealing not the manicured, lamplit grounds of the estate, but a dark, gravel-strewn path that ran alongside the building, the opulent, jasmine-scented paradise he had inhabited just minutes ago was a world away. Here, the air was cool and smelled of damp earth and the faint, unpleasant odor from a nearby row of dumpsters. "The public ferry dock is that way," the security guard said, his voice flat and final. He pointed into the oppressive darkness. "It is a 20-minute walk." The words hung in the air, absurd and impossible. "A walk?" Arthur's voice cracked. "You can't be serious. I need a car. Call me a taxi. A boat. I'll pay," he added, the words hollow even to his own ears. "We are not a taxi service, sir," the guard replied without a flicker of emotion. He and his partner stepped back inside. The heavy service door closed, and the lock engaged with a definitive metallic thud that echoed in the sudden silence. It was the sound of his old life being sealed away forever. He was alone, truly, utterly alone in the dark, surrounded by luggage that represented a fortune he no longer possessed. He looked down at his hands, then at the Brioni suit that suddenly felt like a cheap costume. He had to move the bags himself. The thought was paralyzing. He bent down, his back protesting, and grabbed the handle of the largest suitcase. It was incredibly heavy. He grunted, pulling it a few feet along the gravel path, the small wheels catching and scraping on the stones. He had to stop, breathing heavily, sweat beading on his forehead. He set off on the long, humiliating walk, dragging the suitcase behind him, its rattling wheels the only sound accompanying his ragged breaths. The path was uneven, and he stumbled twice, his thin-soled loafers offering no protection against the sharp stones. Each painful step was a fresh humiliation. From above, he could hear the faint, elegant sounds of the world he'd been ejected from. The sophisticated murmur of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the soft strains of a string quartet playing on the terrace. He imagined the other guests, the German industrialist, the French actress, glancing at his empty sofa, perhaps sharing a brief, pitying whisper before turning back to their champagne. He was already a ghost, a cautionary anecdote to be briefly savoured. As the path curved toward the front of the estate, he saw the main dock, illuminated by wrought-iron lamps. A sleek, private water taxi, its mahogany deck gleaming, was just pulling away. He instinctively ducked behind a thick cypress tree, his heart pounding with a new, sharper shame. He saw a flash of canary yellow fabric. It was Sienna. She was not alone. She was laughing, a bright, tinkling sound that carried across the water. Her arm was linked through that of the German industrialist, a man whose name Arthur couldn't even remember. The man was older, with a quiet, confident posture that made Arthur's own brashness seem childish in retrospect. He was listening to Sienna, nodding, his expression one of amused indulgence. It was the same look Arthur had worn just yesterday. He was watching his own part being recast in real time. Sienna leaned her head on the man's shoulder, looked up at him with wide, adoring eyes, and then they were gone, the boat accelerating into the darkness, leaving a shimmering wake on the black water. She hadn't even glanced back. Arthur felt a wave of nausea. He leaned against the rough bark of the tree, the reality of his situation pressing down on him. He hadn't just been a provider, he had been a stepping stone, a temporary convenience. His grand romantic narrative had been nothing but a business transaction, and his contract had just been voided. He finally stumbled out of the darkness onto the ferry dock. It was nothing like the polished private marina of the villa. It was a crude wooden platform, weathered and splintered, with a single, buzzing fluorescent light that attracted a cloud of moths. A few other people were waiting, a young couple with backpacks, an elderly woman with a shopping bag, a local fisherman smoking a cigarette. They glanced at him, at his ridiculously expensive suit and his mountain of luggage, with open curiosity. He was a freak show, the man who had fallen from the sky. He sat on his largest suitcase, the monogram AV seeming to mock him. High above, on the hill, the Villa Kestrel glittered like a private constellation. He could see the lights on in the imperial suite, his suite, where housekeepers were already erasing any trace of his existence. Then, his eyes were drawn to a different set of windows, in a wing of the villa he hadn't even known was there. A large corner office, its lights blazing. A silhouette moved to the window. It was Amelia. She was not looking down at him. She was looking out at the vast, dark expanse of the lake. Her lake. She held a phone to her ear, nodding occasionally. Mr. Bianchi stood respectfully a few feet away, holding a folder. Her lawyer, David, was there too, pointing to something on a large blueprint spread across a table. They were working. They were building. This wasn't the end of a story for her. It was just another Tuesday night. She was an empress in her war room, and he had been a jester playing in her courtyard, completely oblivious to the scale of her power. The quaint little family office was a global enterprise, and he had been nothing more than a minor, misbehaving asset. His arrogance, his dismissal of her, his affair, they weren't grand betrayals that had broken her heart. They were simply liabilities on a balance sheet, and she, the consummate manager, had finally liquidated them. The ferry's horn blared, a loud, ugly sound that startled him. The boat, a large, functional, and entirely unglamorous vessel, churned toward the dock. He stood up, his legs stiff, and began the laborious process of hauling his luggage aboard, bumping into the other passengers, muttering apologies that felt foreign on his tongue. He found a hard plastic bench on the open-air deck and collapsed onto it. The engines rumbled to life, and the ferry pulled away from the shore. He watched as the lights of the Villa Kestrel grew smaller and smaller, until they were just another sparkle on the horizon. The cold wind whipped across the water, chilling him through his thin suit jacket. He put his head in his hands, the crumpled, useless bill still clutched in his fist. He hadn't just been checked out. He had been rendered obsolete. He had been erased. And as the boat chugged across the dark, indifferent water, Arthur Vance, for the first time in his life, began to weep. The ferry thudded against the pilings of the Como town dock, a jarring, unceremonious arrival that vibrated through the cheap plastic bench and up into Arthur's bones. The other passengers, the backpackers and the locals, surged to their feet, eager to get home. Arthur remained seated, a statue of frozen disbelief, until a crewman yelled, "Signore, finito!" The end. He stood, his body aching, and was faced with the immediate, logistical nightmare of his life: the luggage. He wrestled the bags onto the dock, one by one, a sweaty, grunting spectacle. His hands, accustomed to signing 9-figure deals, were now raw and blistered from the unaccustomed manual labor. The other passengers flowed around him, a river of normal life parting around a rock of opulent misery. No one offered to help. They just stared at the man in the $5,000 suit, now streaked with grime from the ferry deck, who looked like a refugee from a world they only saw in magazines. He was on the brightly lit promenade. It was late, past 11, but the Lungolago was still alive with people strolling, eating gelato, their laughter echoing across the water. It felt like a personal attack. He lined his suitcases up on the pavement like soldiers in a lost cause. He needed a taxi. He needed a hotel. He needed to think. A taxi pulled up. Arthur raised his hand, a gesture he had performed 1,000 times. The driver got out, looked at the mountain of luggage, looked at Arthur, and sighed. "Dove? Where?" "Hotel." Arthur's mind went blank, then latched onto the only other name he knew, a name from his old life. "Hotel Via d'Este, in Cernobbio." The driver's eyes widened, then narrowed. Via d'Este. He whistled, a low, appraising sound. This was a fare worth having. He began, with surprising efficiency, to load the bags into the minivan's trunk, a puzzle of leather and brass. Arthur climbed into the back seat, sinking into the worn upholstery. The car smelled of stale tobacco and pine-scented air freshener. The drive was silent. Arthur stared out the window as they left the town centre and wound along the lake's edge. He saw the grand, gated entrances to other villas, worlds of light and power he had, just hours ago, belonged to. He was in a daze, a state of profound shock that insulated him from the full, crushing weight of his reality. He was operating on the muscle memory of wealth. He would get a room, call Stephen in the morning, and this nightmare would be sorted out. Amelia had made her point. It was a vicious, brilliant power play, but it couldn't be final. It simply couldn't. They pulled up the long, majestic driveway of the Villa d'Este, a hotel that rivaled the Kestrel in its grandeur and history. The doorman, draped in a magnificent uniform, hurried over and opened Arthur's door, greeting him with a polished, "Buonasera, signore." Welcome. Arthur stepped out, his confidence momentarily, reflexively, returning. This was his world. He could fix this. He strode into the lobby, a breathtaking expanse of marble, chandeliers, and priceless antiques. He walked directly to the front desk, leaving the driver and the doorman to handle the bags. "A suite, please," he said to the clerk, a woman whose smile was a masterpiece of professional hospitality. "Lakeview, whatever you have." "Of course, sir. May I have a credit card and your passport?" Arthur pulled out his wallet. He handed her the Amex Centurion. The black card, his primary weapon and symbol, looked solid and real. He was Arthur Vance. This would work. The clerk swiped it. Her smile faltered, just for a second. She swiped it again. "I'm sorry, signore. There seems to be an issue." "That's impossible," Arthur said, his voice a little too loud. "Run it again." "I have, sir," she said, her voice dropping, her eyes flicking to the doorman. "It is declined." "Declined?" The word was alien. "Fine." He was annoyed, not panicked. Not yet. He pulled out his J.P. Morgan Reserve card. "Try this one." She swiped it. The result was the same. Her smile was gone, replaced by a mask of polite suspicion. "This one as well, sir." "This is ridiculous," Arthur said, his voice echoing in the cavernous lobby. A couple dining on the terrace turned to look. "Your system is broken. Call the bank." "Sir, it is nearly midnight," the clerk said, her patience clearly gone. "Both cards are declined." Arthur's blood ran cold. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a creeping, icy terror. It was real. Amelia had done it. She had cut every line. He fumbled in his wallet. Cash. He had cash. He'd taken out 1,000 euros at the airport for walking around money. He'd given some to Sienna. He pulled out what was left, around 700 euros. "Here," he said, shoving the bills onto the counter. "This is for the deposit. I'll sort the cards in the morning." The clerk looked at the small pile of cash with undisguised contempt. "Signore, our rooms start at 3,000 euros per night. This is not sufficient for a deposit, or even for one night. But I just need a room. I'm afraid we have no availability for you, sir," she said, the final polite words of execution. A discreet signal, and a security manager, not a doorman, was suddenly at Arthur's elbow. "Sir, if you would please come with me." He was escorted back outside. The doorman, his face now a mask of disdain, was pulling his last suitcase from the taxi. The driver stood by, his arms crossed, his expression furious. "My fare," the driver snapped. "To Cannobio. And the weight, 120 euros. Arthur stared at him. 120 euros. For a drive that ended in his own eviction. He looked at the 700 euros in his hand. He gave the man the money, his hand trembling. The driver counted it, handed back a few coins, got in his cab, and sped off, leaving Arthur alone on the curb, a pariah at the gates of paradise. He was stranded. It was past midnight. His luggage, his beautiful, useless luggage, was piled around his feet like a barricade. He couldn't stay here. He looked at the pile. 3 large suitcases, a garment bag, his briefcase. He couldn't carry it all. He made a decision. It was the first decision of his new life. He unzipped the largest suitcase, his hands tearing at the contents. He pulled out a pair of jeans, a simple polo shirt, his dop kit, and his laptop. He stuffed them into his briefcase, and his one small carry-on roller bag. He zipped them up. Then he stood and looked at the rest. The Brioni suits, the handmade shoes, the silk ties. Thousands and thousands of dollars of his old life, sitting on a curb in Italy. He turned his back on it. He left it all there. He began to walk, pulling the single roller bag, its wheels rattling on the cobblestones. He walked away from the lake, away from the lights, away from the world he knew. He walked for what felt like hours, his feet screaming in their thin leather shoes. He headed toward the one place he knew would be open, the train station. The area around the Stazione was a different world. The grand villas gave way to drab 1960s apartment blocks. The scent of jasmine was replaced by the smell of diesel and stale beer. He found what he was looking for. A small 2-star albergo with a flickering neon sign that simply said, "Hotel." He pushed open the glass door. The lobby was a small, linoleum-tiled room where a sleepy man in a t-shirt sat behind a plywood desk, watching a tiny television. The man looked up, his eyes taking in Arthur's filthy, expensive suit and his single, high-end roller bag. It was a combination that screamed trouble. "Avete una camera?" Arthur asked, his voice a dry croak. "Do you have a room?" The man grunted. €80. 80 euros. In anticipo. In advance. Arthur pulled out his remaining cash. He had just over 500 euros left. He peeled off the notes and handed them over. The man took them, counted them, and pushed a physical key across the desk. It was attached to a large red plastic fob with the room number 3B written on it in faded marker. "Terzo piano," the man said, gesturing to a tiny, coffin-like elevator. The elevator shuddered its way to the 3rd floor, the smell of stale cigarettes thick in the air. He found room 3B. The key barely worked in the lock, but after a struggle, the door swung open. The room was a cell. It was dominated by a lumpy double bed covered in a thin, brown and orange bedspread. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling. The bathroom was a tiny plastic cubicle with a flickering fluorescent light that buzzed like an angry insect. The single window looked out not onto the lake, but onto a narrow, dark alley, where he could hear the clatter of bins and a distant argument in Italian. Arthur walked in. He let the roller bag drop. He didn't turn on the main light, leaving the room in the dim glow from the alley. He sat on the edge of the lumpy bed. The springs squeaked in protest. He was alone. He was in a cheap hotel near a train station. He had 500 euros to his name. He caught his reflection in the cheap, warped mirror hanging on the wall. He saw a stranger, a disheveled, hollow-eyed man, his face pale with sweat and fear. The arrogant king of Lake Como was gone. In his place was this terrified creature. His Patek Philippe still glowed on his wrist. He pulled out his phone. He tried to call Stephen, his lawyer, straight to voicemail. "The number you have dialed is not in service. Not voicemail. Disconnected." He tried Robert, his COO. "This number is no longer active." He tried his private banker. Disconnected. Amelia hadn't just frozen his assets. She hadn't just called his loans. She had systematically dismantled his entire support structure. The lawyers, the bankers, the executives, they were loyal to the money, and the money was hers. He was excommunicated. He stared at the Patek on his wrist. It was worth, what? $300,000? It was the only thing of value he had left. It was his last life raft. He unclasped it, the rose gold suddenly feeling impossibly heavy, almost obscene, in the squalor of the room. He placed it on the chipped laminate nightstand. The quiet, elegant tick, tick. Tick of its movement was the only sound in the room, a relentless, indifferent clock counting down the seconds of a life that had already expired. Thank you for joining us for this story. It's a powerful reminder that arrogancy often blinds us to the true power sitting right across the table. Arthur saw his wife as a relic of his past, never realizing she was the architect of his entire present. He thought he owned the world, but he didn't even own himself. His flaunting was not a sign of his success, but the trigger for his spectacular downfall, proving that quiet intelligence and hidden strength will always outlast the loudest boasts. What did you think of Amelia's revenge? Was it perfectly executed, or a calculated move she'd been planning for years? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want more tales of dramatic justice and incredible twists, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a good story, and most importantly, click subscribe and turn on all notifications. We have new stories dropping every week, and you won't want to miss what happens next.